morning, everyone. I hope everybody's joined us. Welcome to today's virtual webinar with Condo Protego and Veritas Technologies. My name is Annie Bricker, and I am the former senior editor of Computer News Middle East and current contributing editor for IDG's CIO.com. And I'm delighted to be working again with CPI Media Group to moderate this session. The objective of this morning's webinar is to examine ways to help reduce complexity in your hybrid multi-cloud environment. Before we begin, I'd just like to briefly review today's agenda. First, we'll have a brief introduction from Savitha Bhaskar, COO and co-founder of Condo Protego. And our presentation will be from Tariq El-Ridi, Senior Solutions Sales Engineer from Veritas Technologies. The presentation is entitled Cloud Journey with Veritas, See, Move, Protect, and will be followed by a brief Q&A. Following the presentation, I will invite Savitha, Tariq, and also from Veritas, Brett Samuel, Head of Technology, Middle East and South Africa, and Amir Hussain, Regional Channel Sales Manager, to join me for a brief panel discussion. For all the attendees, please feel free to use the chat function to ask questions. We will do our best to address all of your queries during the Q&A and panel sessions. So without further ado, I would like to invite Savitha to deliver an introductory note on behalf of Condo Protego that will provide some very interesting insights into the state of cloud in the MENA region.
So welcome to this session. And thank you for making time for this. While deciding the topic, we had a discussion amongst ourselves and the common questions and the common topic of interest that customers always ask us about in meetings in the last at least year and a half is what are our capabilities and what can we do to help them in their cloud journeys. So we thought today's session would be we choose the hot topic of how do you reduce complexity in your hybrid multi-cloud environment. So I want to quote some industry analyst figures here, particularly these are from IDC. IDC says that by 2022, UAE is expected to have 1.5 billion public cloud expenditure. And that's a big number. And this is expected to generate 20 billion net new revenues and also create about 50,000 jobs. And there are so many such positive statistics that talk about the cloud journeys that businesses and enterprises here are undertaking in the MENA region and particularly also in the UAE. At the same time, we also see articles like this one. This one is also an IDC survey, and it said, why are Middle East organizations moving from public to private or hybrid clouds? Similarly, there was another analyst report which said that 50% of the people who went to public clouds are repatriating over the next 2 years. And there was a detailed analysis of what were the repatriation drivers. Of course, cost was one of them because a lot of people went into public cloud expecting to reduce their cost, or they expected similar performance, and so many other factors. And these repatriation drivers were then analyzed and also a sort of a chart prepared on what customers think is the highest priority, and no surprises at all, security is the highest priority. And that's one of the reasons why people felt public cloud for everything is not their choice. At the same token, there are articles that talk about how 95% of enterprises will definitely use multiple cloud services and platforms, and 75% of them will have core cloud API strategies, meaning cloud native and cloud first type of strategies. So that is also interesting. So what does this all mean to people? How do we put this into perspective and link it back to the complexity in the hybrid and multi-cloud environments and why it needs careful management? So if you look at a multi-cloud adoption type, So this is a current status. This is a fairly, this chart is not absolutely current. It is a fairly sort of 4 to 6 quarters old chart where we're talking about single cloud was 28%. There was about 40% of the people with the multi-cloud strategies already, and so on. Similarly, we talked, this article talks about how customers embrace various cloud models and many concurrently, and also how they're moving from hosted private clouds to public clouds. And hosted private clouds are very common in UAE, and moving from on-prem to private cloud, and then onwards to hosted private cloud, and from there moving to public cloud, maybe coming back from public cloud to a hybrid model. Maybe they have a on-prem production with the cloud DR, or maybe they have production for some applications on cloud and DR for those applications on a different cloud, and so on and so forth, and various permutations, combinations. The commonality in all of this, and the significant point to note in all of this, is not these numbers. It is that irrespective of where we are all moving, from which cloud to which cloud, whether it's from on-prem to a cloud, or cloud to a cloud, or cloud back to on-prem, whatever we are doing, all of this requires complex, careful, and meticulous handling of this data movement, and it needs to be done with proper tools. So particularly about hybrid cloud is not frictionless. What I mean by that is any kind of movement creates friction. This is laws of physics, right? So any kind of movement, irrespective of from where, to where, whether multi-hop, all of this has some amount of friction in it. And alongside it, there are other complexities, like there are business and compliance requirements. Businesses have to decide what is the value they're getting out of it. Is the cloud strategy leading into their digital transformation journeys? Are they still going to be able to meet compliance requirements? Because compliance requirements apply whether the data is on-prem or on cloud, and also whether these movements are commercially and technically viable. Because it's not just a question of cost, but it's also a question of capability and features. So these and more bring complexity into this hybrid cloud context. So how do we address it is what we're going to talk about in this session. It's a short session of 2 hours, and I believe you will find it extremely interesting, because there's some subject matter experts who are going to particularly focus on hybrid clouds and how we can help you ease the complexities there. Just a quick word about Condo Protego, for if you've not heard about us. We've been here in the UAE for 15 years. We primarily operate in the large to medium-sized enterprises. We focus on the data stack. The word Condo Protego is about data. It means to store and protect data. So when we focus on the data stack, we do everything on it, right from the time it's created till the time it is destroyed. Therefore, we are ideally positioned to help you in this journey and managing the complexities that you would inevitably encounter on your journeys to the hybrid cloud model, because we believe ultimately that's what is going to stabilize. People will go into maybe full public, maybe partially public, but maybe retain lots of footprint on-prem, and therefore they'll have a hybrid cloud model to deal with. In the panel, of course, I'm open to questions, and I think now I'll pass on to my colleague Tarek. Thank you.
Thank you so very much, Savita. Some really great insights into what is happening in cloud in the region and in the UAE specifically. Thank you very much. I'd now like to invite our main presenter, Tarek Al-Redi from Veritas, to take the screen for our presentation.
Thank you, Annie, and good morning, everyone. My name is Tarek Al-Redi. I'm a Senior Solution SE in Veritas. I hope you enjoy the session for the journey to the cloud. So our theme today is See, Move, Protect. which is basically how Veritas can help you see what data that you have, which data you want to move, which data you want to keep, how you are going to move, and then how we are going to help you to protect. Before I just start into diving into the main subject, I just want to put a baseline here to everyone, because there is a misconception in the market that I'm in the cloud, I don't need backup. And if you go to your main contract, Microsoft or Azure or Amazon or these kind of cloud providers, you will clearly see that the infrastructure availability, it is the cloud provider responsibility. Availability, it means availability, powering on, keeping on, network stability, but the data inside the virtual machines, user data, OneDrive data, database data, it is your responsibility. It means if anything happens, you are responsible to restore it back, and simply that's it. So yes, Office 365 as an example, they provide 30 days up to 90 days restore, but after that 90 days, it's gone. It's removed from the trash, you cannot restore it, it's not searchable, and it's gone. So this misconception, we need to put a baseline in front of everyone. You need a backup solution for your cloud system, okay? We start with some challenges. Of course, most of these challenges you all know, but you know that the data is growing. Data is growing, we depend on the data. Data is getting more critical. Data is getting more, we depend on the data more in order to us as a business owner to take better decisions. Sometimes you need to understand certain things in order to divert your company or your directions to a different ways, you know, for a better revenue, for a better decision making. With all these complexity, you are still into the budget constraints. Of course, with the COVID-19, the budget is more pressured. Infrastructure complexity. I have computing power, networking, storage, data. I want to move to the cloud. How I'm going to move? How I'm going to migrate? What about the security? A lot of complexity here. And of course, the compliance, how we are going to meet the compliance, especially GDPR, or at least the basic compliance. Data, is the files are secured? What kind of file that it has critical data that I want to protect or I want to erase, or why this guy or this employee has access to a certain file which he resigned, as an example. So these are all challenges we are facing these days. We as Veritas, we can help you see. We can help you see what kind of data, dark data, critical data, sensitive data. We can help you look into your infrastructure. Is it right decision to move it? Is it right decision to overprotect it from a backup perspective? Is it a right decision to keep it on premise? What about the files? What about do I have file that it has some critical information, PII or credit card information, or etc., etc. And then we can also help you move. After you see the data, you will be able to move which data that it needs to be moved or migrated to the cloud, or to have, or let's say a certain business service like a financial, which is not protected from an availability or business continuity perspective. So we can help you see, we can help you move, and finally we can help you protect. We can help you, we protect your environment from any ransomware attacks, from any human errors, from any natural disasters, from availability, from power outage. We in Veritas can help you see, move, and protect, and this is our theme for today. Starting by seeing your environment. Forget about the analysis, just I'm gonna talk about you as an individual. How often you go back to a data which is older than a month or 2 months, and multiply this across all the company. So I personally, I know my data, I know my daily, my weekly, my bi-weekly, but anything older than this, I have to look for it. I have to search for it. I don't know if I have the file or doesn't have the file. So imagine if I am the file owner, doesn't know the full details of my files. What about the IT himself? How he will know which employee, which file is important to which employee? And this is the analysis, as you can see. 15% of the data we all know about. 33 up to 52, which is the remaining of the data, we have to search, we have to look for it. What kind of data that we have? Is it important? Do we need to delete it? Do we need to put it on a different media? Why it's taking place in my production system? So this is the real problem now with the data. The problem that if you started to dig in and try to solve this problem, first of all, we don't know. We don't know the NAS file share or the file share, who's for who, and the file, do I need to keep it or not? And if I start to take decision to actually dig into it, it will take a long time. And it will cost a lot, it will consume a lot of your time, and most probably you will not end up with real segregating and cutting your file share, putting it in the right place. So you need a tool. You need a tool for this. You need a tool to see your files. You need a tool to see your infrastructure. So we in Veritas, we can help you see infrastructure, what kind of infrastructure that you want to keep. You want to keep it on or off, or move it to the cloud. And we help you see from a file perspective. These files are critical. These files, remember, there is a risk score high in this file. Please pay attention, try to overprotect it. So we can help you see infrastructure on file. Starting with the infrastructure, we have a tool called Aptar. Aptar is basically an IT analytic tool that it can look into any kind of cloud, Amazon, Azure, any kind of cloud, any kind of storage, NAS, SAN, any vendor, any kind of backup solution. It's totally agnostic. And what happens, after scanning these data, it correlates the data with each other. So as an example, I have a VM in my production system, which is replicated to Amazon, and I'm using Veeam to back up the VM from the storage, and I'm using NetBackup to back up the same VM, but from the cloud. So it correlates the data, and it can show you that, hey, Mr. Customer, why you are protecting the VM by Veeam and the same VM by NetBackup. Try to move between the policies in order to reduce your licensing cost, you reduce your storage cost, etc., etc. It's a tool that it's agentless. As you can see, it scans any private or public cloud, network storage, any backup system in the market, as you can see, storage, file system, Linux or operating or Unix, backup to the cloud, virtual environment, simply most of the hypervisors in the market, any file system or volume manager, cluster file system, HPUX, and your SAN switches. So it's basically, it collects data across all this, and it starts generating reports. We have built in the system default templates, around 200 something templates. I'm just gonna show you some samples related to the cloud. So when we start to dig in, let's say, for an example, for the storage optimization, right away it can show me that I have a reclaimable capacity of this amount. Most probably, from our experience, it gives 20 to 40% capacity that you can reclaim from production storage, which is direct saving on your production system. out of the reclaimable capacity, what are the details inside? You will have unallocated LUNs, you will have high backup retentions, VMs has been powered off, orphan data snapshots, and you can start to dig into each detail until you reach where is the exact root cause, and then you as an IT, you will have better decision in order to delete or to power off or to move. Because usually delete and power off and move, this is a very tough decision from an IT perspective. With this tool, it can help you take these kind of decisions and reduce costs. It can also show you, as you can see, storage optimization across any kind of file system. So file type usage, Amazon orphan snapshot, it can give you a holistic view what is happening across, let's say, 4 weeks, 8 weeks. Why orphan, as example, orphan files has been raised in certain period of time. So you can see more visibility, what's happening. Maybe that because of the acquired the company, something happened, and yes, so I need to clean up the data of the company that I acquired, as an example. Another report which is related to cost, it can look into your costing. So let's say you have a cloud subscription, a cloud infrastructure tier 1 and cloud infrastructure tier 2, one let's say for production, one for UAT and development, and the cost, and it can show you the cost that you are paying for this cloud provider, and you can dig into the details and see which system is costing you a lot. Is it tier 1 or tier 2, linked to which storage, full visibility on your system. And of course, this is related to your cloud or on-premise. You can even start allocating capacities by environment. So I have a production system and cloud system and UAT. So you can dig into, you can see the view, but in a different, you can see the information, but from a different view. Also, which is interesting here, the business units. Which business units is costing you how much? So development is costing you, let's say 150K, 157K. Why? Dig into the details and you will know why. And you can, maybe you can see that the UAT or development, they are just spinning on VMs, and they are not taking care of powering it on, or sorry, off, or shutting it down or deleting it, and it will end up that you are paying money for something that the company doesn't use. Also, you can allocate capacities per application, as you can see, SAP, Oracle Finance, and these are, and guys, this is just 1 or 2 reports. Aptar is a very deep and long discussion. So if you're interested, just put your interest in the panelist and the question, and we can have 1 hour to 1.5 hour session just only talking about Aptar. Also, you can see here some spendings on your public cloud. So this is Azure, how much it cost in each month, and then suddenly something happened, which is Amazon taking over the cost and no utilization in Amazon. Why? What happened? You can dig into the details and understand why. Okay. Switching from the infrastructure visibility, we're going to take you to the files visibility. So Data Insight, it's a tool that it can look into your file system, your NAS storage, and your SharePoint. It's mainly dedicated and searching into your files, doing the analytics and the indexing and giving you the information for you to see what kind of file that I have. Permissions, let's say, and it's linked to Active Directory. Let's say you have an employee, he left the company, but he still has permissions, and This is a risk score that it will populate to you and notify you in order for you to start playing with the permission and putting it right, and remove that permission. As an example, a custodian or an owner of the file, but he's not really using it. Someone else is using it. How often is using it? Is it right for that guy to use the folder or use that file? As an example, one of the finance team, he created a file which it has some data, but we found that the administrator is using it or revising it. Why that? Or someone from the IT. So that's a score. It will give you all the details, analytic by itself every day, what risk happened into your environment. So it can give you consumption reports, permission reports, capacity. Okay. Top 5 users accessing certain file share. Okay. Is it right for, let's say, John to use that file? Why Tom is using it? Is it okay, not okay? These kind of reports. Another example of data inside, which is the owner permission. As I told you as the example, so and I have certain file share with created by administrator. The last known activity under this is Mike as read and write. As you can see here, admin last written. But I know as an IT that this folder, yes, the administrator, he has the right to create it, but why the admin is writing to it? So automatically we take this to a risk score, a following report that I'm going to show you in the next slide. Okay. And this also is a different dashboard. You can see your what kind of sensitive data that I have. I'll just tell you an example that I had in one of entities here in Dubai. Software, our data insight has been installed, and it just populates risk score on a certain file share to the administrator that there is an IP address. So it detected what happened. It detected a file, Word file, that it has IP addresses. And if you start to think about, if I have an employee, he's not, let's say, he's not an IT employee, he's just a finance or marketing, and he has a file in the file share that it has IP addresses. Why? That's a risk. That's a big risk. One of the things that we can detect, PII information, ID information, credit card information. We can automatically detect these kind of information and bring it and segregate them across the sensitivity of the data or the level of how risk and how it is sensitive comparing to our indexing, of course, analytics. As I told you, we have a risk score. So we take the files, we identify them, and we put them as high risk, low risk. Let's say an email, a file that it has 1 IP address. Maybe that's a mid risk, but a file that it has 10 IP addresses, 50 IP addresses. That's a very high risk. It goes to a risk score 100. You can just click on the risk score, and it will take you what are the files that it has high risk, and you start delve in and see what's happening. So these are the tools that help you see the Aptar and data insight. These tools, it can help you. I have certain infrastructure. I want to move to the cloud. These are the VMs that I don't use. I only want to migrate this amount of VMs. Or file share, these files has not been accessed for a certain amount of period. I delete them, or I put it in a media or a tape, and I just move the file that it is relevant or important for me right now. This will help you reduce the cost on storage, reduce the migration. Rather than moving 10 terabytes as an example, you move 5 terabytes. So, and it gives you the same visibility from the cloud perspective. Now, you understand what data that you have a full insight, full visibility, how you can move. We moving the data, it has some challenges. You need to move, you need to migrate, and that's a project by itself. You need a tool to migrate. Yes, Azure, they have their own migration tool, and Amazon, but from a security perspective, they lack certain things, and they are expensive. So you need to find a way to be agnostic. Let's say you have a couple of VMs, Oracle VM, Hyper-V, Amazon, Unix, Linux, and you want to move them. Yes, you cannot use Linux, but maybe you want to migrate the Unix to a Linux environment in the cloud. So you need a tool to understand and to be flexible enough to move across all this. And when you have a tool, from a financial perspective, it would be much more lower rather than having a financial code from Azure, another financial code from Amazon, another one for the Linux migration, etc., etc. So heterogeneous infrastructure also is, as I told you, you move, let's say you move from Oracle to SQL Online. One of the service providers here, very well known in UAE, their hypervisor is Azure Stack. And they provide infrastructure as a service, DR as a service, and IT as a service. So they go to their customer and they see that they have a VM. And the customer tell them or ask them that I don't want to move my infrastructure, but I want to have a disaster recovery as a service. So the customer is having VMware, and the service provider is having Azure. How you can fail over and fail back. So they will end up, from a service provider perspective, they lose opportunities. So that's a challenge. And in order to put all this control by the compliance, that's a totally different challenge also. We in Veritas, we can help you move across all these different challenges. We have two different tools, Infoscale and resiliency platform. The main differences between these two, they are both business continuity, they are both for migration, on-premise to on-premise or on-premise to cloud or to cloud to cloud. They are both for testing disaster recovery. But the difference is mainly is how critical is your application, how complex is your application. So when it comes to Infoscale, we mainly talking about application. You have a financial application and you want to make the financial application available, regardless the infrastructure behind it, regardless the location, regardless the cluster, is it using cluster or non-cluster? I'm talking about the application itself. So this is for the critical application. Resiliency platform is mainly for virtual machine. So we move virtual machines across different locations. Both of them, of course, are automatic recovery. The RPOs is in the Infoscale is much more aggressive than resiliency. RTO, we can give nearly zero in Infoscale. In RTO and resiliency, 15 minutes and above. With Infoscale, we can have an active environment. So one of the airline airline companies here in Dubai, if you go to www.com, the main booking system itself is all protected by Infoscale, around 250 servers. They are all active across different sites, and they are all protecting the whole booking system. The booking system, which is the web, the landing page, up to the database and the application layers in between. For the resiliency, it's mainly active-passive environment. So you have an active, you have passive, and you just fail over and fail back. So this is the main differences between these two. High availability and disaster recovery is Infoscale. Resiliency is mainly disaster recovery only. So Infoscale, it's a tool. It's a software that you put it on top of your operating system. It's a platform agnostic. It's storage agnostic. It's regardless the location of the data. It is flexible enough to move VMware to Hyper-V. It's flexible enough to fail over between different infrastructures, from Oracle VM in on-premise to Azure on Amazon. Azure on Microsoft on Azure. So it's totally agnostic. It's only focused on your application, and the main responsibility is to make the application available regardless of the infrastructure. Resiliency platform, as I told you, it's mainly virtual machines. You have VMware, you want to fail it over to a disaster recovery, or to another VMware, or to Amazon, or to Azure. This is the main thing. It just focus on your VM. Yes, Annie?
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. Just a quick question. So if a customer has multiple platforms across sites, how do you manage different business continuity plans across all these different virtualization platforms?
So mainly with Infoscale, it's again, it's a tool that it can be installed in on the operating system, but the infrastructure itself, it can be different. I don't know if I mentioned the same example or not. You have a service provider and you have companies, and you want to fail over between VMware to Hyper-V. You want to fail over between physical to virtual environment. You want to fail over between VMware to any non-VMware environment. Okay, Infoscale is a solution that is unique in the market, that it can fail over across different platforms agnostically, does not depend on the storage replication or the type of cluster that you have. We can take over the cluster, we can provision a storage, we can make the system available. We are a clustering system plus disaster recovery orchestration, running by itself. We don't need any extras, we don't need storage replication, we don't need anything else except our Infoscale, and that's our unique value in the market right now.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Anne. Resiliency platform, again, it's focusing on your VMs, failing over between different locations, on-premise, or on-premise to your cloud. The type of clustering that we can give, we can give you local availability. So if you have an Oracle rack, we can manage your Oracle rack, or we can take over the Oracle rack. If you have SQL always on, we can take over it, or we can manage it. We are a clustered file system, or we can manage a cluster file system. So we can provide you local high availability, an application that it can fail over between two different operating systems. And regardless that physical to virtual or same platform, we only manage from the operating system view. We can have a metro cluster or stretch cluster across two different zones or two different locations, or two different zones in Amazon. We also support synchronous replication. Also, what we can do, we can fail over between different regions. We can have UAE and cloud, UAE and Egypt, UAE and different country. Okay, so yes, we can do a global cluster using Infoscale. We also focus and when we talk about the SLAs that we can provide, we don't talk about certain virtual machines or certain operating system. No, we can look into your let's say your business critical system, your financial system, that it can contain a web server from Amazon on Windows. It can contain the application on Linux and database on Unix. So we put Infoscale across. We understand the dependencies, and when we fail it over, we fail the group itself. So you can have a full availability for the financial system itself. This can be, you can start, you can stop, you can fail over, you can fail back, you can test the disaster recovery in an isolated network, and all managed by Infoscale. Disaster recovery between the cloud. Maybe you have an Amazon and you want to replicate to Azure. Maybe you want to fail over to a different cloud provider. These are all supported by us, And of course, it's not only failover and failback, it's only migrations. It's also migration. So we can fail over, we can migrate, we can help you migrate from on-premise to the cloud.
And I'm sorry to interrupt again, another question coming in. So how does Veritas license these business continuity solutions?
Okay. So that's a good question. Annie, 2 months back, 3 months back, we used to have resiliency platform, which is a tool that it fail over and fail back virtual machines, separate product, separate licensing, separate cost. 2 months back, we announced our backup solution, NetBackup 8.3, and we embedded the resiliency platform inside NetBackup. So when you buy NetBackup, which is the same cost didn't change. 3 months back, this is only backup. 2 months back with 8.3, you will have backup and disaster recovery resiliency platform. So resiliency platform, it's per capacity inside the NetBackup. The 1 terabyte of NetBackup, it covers backup and it covers disaster recovery at the same time. Plus, if you want to cover the application, this is an add-on using Infoscale, which is per operating system. This operating system on a VM or on a physical, it's per operating system. That's it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So last scenario, which is you have an on-premise and you want to fail over to the cloud, you want to migrate to the cloud, you want to replicate to the cloud. This is all supported by our business continuity system. So we helped you see, you can see which data. We help you move the data. Now we want to protect. You moved, everything is running, everything is okay. I need to protect. And please, if you are in the cloud, this means that the data is not protected. The system is protected, but the data is not protected. You must have a backup solution. We can cover any kind of scenario. We can protect any kind of scenario that you have. So if you have a storage in the cloud, we can protect it as a blob storage. We can protect it. If you have an infrastructure as a service, if you are a provider, we can run behind that infrastructure as a service. Or if your system is on top of infrastructure as a service, we protect it. IT as a service, we protected. Disaster recovery as a service, we protect it. So with any kind of scenarios that you have in the cloud or even on the premise, NetBackup is flexible enough to move across these different scenarios. We can work behind a service provider to help them offer backup as a service, or if your infrastructure is on any kind of service provider on site or publicly, we protect them. This is mainly to cover your Office 365. So most of the customers, because Microsoft, they moved now to UAE data center, so most of the customers are confident enough to move their email system and the file share on Office 365. But if you move to Office 365, I need a pointer. Excuse me. Yeah, if you move to Office 365, this is the items that Microsoft is responsible to protect. These 3 is your responsibility, Mr. Customer. So the data should be protected by a backup solution. We in Veritas, we can help you back up your Office 365 using our SaaS, and this help you protect Office 365, G Suite, Salesforce, and they are all in the same license. It's a SaaS solution that it has unlimited storage, unlimited retentions. It is per user, per subscription, and it can give you granular level restores for all these items. So you can have a file level restore, you can have versioning control, you can have document level restore from the SharePoint, Teams, emails, calendars. all this is you can have granularly restored from our system. It doesn't need any hardware, it doesn't need any installation, it just put the subscription over 365, it will directly start taking backup 2 times a day. With NetBackup, you can backup to the cloud. So you have a system which is running on-premise, and you decided to write the long-term retention to the cloud, supported. You decided to have a tapeless and to have all the data in the cloud, supported. You are restoring the data to a certain VM in Azure in order to bring it on or as a migration project to the cloud, supported. So NetBackup is flexible enough to help you move to the cloud through our restore or through our cloud catalyst. With backup in the cloud, you have certain VMs on Amazon or Azure. You can do 2 things. You can buy NetBackup and spin on a VM on the cloud, and you start install NetBackup and you start taking backup from this VM to NetBackup, writing to an Amazon disk. Or you can go to Amazon Marketplace, purchase a NetBackup as a service using powered by NetBackup, and also you can start taking backup. So both flexible ways is available. This is pure financial comparison. How your licensing model is flexible, is easy, fit your needs, and both scenarios are supported. The same way in in Azure. So in Azure, you can bring on a VM by NetBackup, install it, and start taking backup to Azure Blob Storage or to Azure Storage or hot or cold, or buy NetBackup from your marketplace. With using some customers, they are using cloud as a disaster recovery. So they have on-premise, they don't want to move the production system to the cloud, but they want the disaster recovery in the cloud. Supported by putting a NetBackup solution inside on-premise, and we can have a replication of the backup copies to Azure Blob Storage or to Azure Disk. And we can, using the resiliency platform built in, we can not only replicate the backup copies, we can now fail over your system to Azure and fail it back. You can test the failover. You can do a disaster recovery testing, migration, rehearsals. All this is now built in NetBackup. You don't need with NetBackup anymore any disaster recovery solution because our resiliency platform is now built in. So on-premise to the cloud scenarios, backup, replicating backup copies, failing over and failing back, supported with the same license. My final slide to you, customers, I hope that I'm just summarizing what we now do. We in Veritas, we can help you have data visibility to know which data, which infrastructure that it needs to be moved. Of course, when you know your infrastructure more, you know your data is more to be compliant, we can help you be your business to be available across different scenarios, protect them, the applications flexibility between different, let's say, as I told you, different hypervisors or different file systems. And finally, we help you optimize your storage in order to have efficient, high performance and cost, to reduce your cost on the storage optimization. A full view on your infrastructure. I hope it's fruitful and productive for you. Back to you, Annie.
Thank you very much, Tariq. We actually had a question come in. Is there any Veritas tool to back up Office 365 in on-premise storage?
Okay, so the short answer is no. We back up Office 365 to our SaaS environment. And this actually is much more better than backing up to your on-premise, because if you want to back up Office 365, directly to your local site, you need to build a backup solution, infrastructure, computing power, storage in order to stream the Office 365 directly to your data center. This will consume a lot of bandwidth, and you will have a single copy, and you will back up Office 365 one time. With SaaS, we back up 2 times. We replicate the data across our different data centers, so we have 4 copies for a single copy of the backed up copy from Office 365 to our system. And at the end, if you want to have a local copy of your Office 365, you can simply download the backed up copy to your on-premise. So we cover the on-premise, the Office 365, we cover it on the cloud with more efficient, and we can give a local copy for you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for your presentation. That was just some incredible insight. And it's clear that things are becoming more and more complex in the world of cloud, particularly hybrid cloud, and having a partner to navigate some of that complexity is just invaluable.
Yeah.
So now I'd like to invite Savitha back on screen and welcome Brett and Amir to join Tarek and myself for a brief panel discussion. For attendees, please feel free again to use the chat function to ask questions at any stage during the panel, and we'll go ahead and get some expert insight. So Brett and Amir, welcome to the screen, and Savitha, welcome back. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to start with a question for Savitha. We'll give Tarek a small break after all that. So before we dive in, if you could give us just a little bit of background on the relationship between Condo Protego and Veritas.
Thank you for the question, because we do have a very unique relationship with Veritas. We were actually signed up by Veritas 15 years ago, when Veritas was still Veritas before the acquisition by Symantec, and to focus on the data archival technologies. So we were nominated like a niche partner, a boutique partner, to lead in this market with the new product they had called Enterprise Vault, and that's where the relationship started. And then there onwards, of course, within a year or two, Symantec had acquired Veritas. So right from the second year onwards, we've always been a Veritas or a Symantec Platinum partner. This actually is a proof of our technical capability, because in order to achieve Platinum position, which is the highest level of competency, there are stringent technical requirements. And when Symantec those days started a consulting program, we were one of the first to be on it. All our engineers were all certified as master specialists, which means again the highest levels of certification in the whole world. And in fact, I think there were only 13 people, and we had 4 of them who were master specialists. So there onwards, of course, then Veritas spun off from Symantec. So the reason I'm giving the background is to show that we are not an opportunistic partner who decided to tie up with Veritas just because 2 customers wanted to buy Backup Exec or NetBackup. No, we have been strategically working with Veritas because their technologies and their messaging fits in very well with our goals as well. Because like I said before, we are a data storage, data management, data protection, everything around the data stack partner. So which means the company that is number 1 in terms of solutions for data management, protection, HA, DR is Veritas. And that's how we've been working with them for over 15 years. We still are a platinum partner, continue to be so, and we still work with Veritas on a number of consulting projects. And besides that, we also this year got invited to be part of their a special program called Platinum Vantage, which is by invitation only program for select partners around the world. So I think in the whole of emerging, there is just us.
Amazing.
So that gives the depth of our relationship and our seriousness and focus on it. It's not a Me Too product for us, because there are a lot of organizations that seem to badge collect and have a number of everybody can fulfill everything. Whereas this is our core product, so we are not a Me Too partner. So if anybody is seriously looking at Veritas solution, they automatically come to us, and we support some of the largest enterprises in the Middle East, and especially in UAE for backup, archival, high availability, all of the technologies that Tariq just discussed, Infoscale, VRP, all of that. So we've experienced in all of those.
So it's clear that Condo Protego has been working to protect data in the region for many years. And I'm sure that you have seen data protection policies around the world develop over time over those years. And now many businesses in the UAE are tasked with the need to stay compliant with international data regulations, for example, GDPR, but there's many others. So how can Condo Protego help businesses stay compliant with all of these protocols?
It's a very good question again. As I said, we work in the large enterprise space. A number of our customers, although they are homegrown UAE companies, organizations, large organizations, banks, oil and gas, and so on and so forth, and even retail and distribution customers who are all Dubai's and UAE's very own organizations. They do have multinational operations. Many definitely have regional operations, maybe right up to Egypt, Morocco, in the sort of African belt. Some, of course, all over GCC. But many have operations in Singapore, in London, in New York. So which means these organizations need to be compliant in terms of their data retention with the global regulations. It could, based on their industry. If it's a medical, like a hospital, they have their own regulations. Banks have their own regulations. But also they have a commonality in terms of regulations like GDPR, which is cutting across industries. So they have to be compliant to all of those. So then it's difficult for people to just be compliant to one particular subset of their data and not everything else. So they end up implementing the same best practices across to cover their entire organization. Because to be fair, these regulations are there ultimately to protect consumers. So, which means it's good to adapt these practices, not just for compliance reasons, not just to be compliant, but also for governance and fair practice. So they embrace it, and we work with them and domain expert consultants to build solutions based on technologies from Veritas and others.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I mean, it just becomes more complex. And again, it just shows why partnering with the experts is really the way to go. Brett, welcome to the panel.
Thank you.
This is Brett Samuels from Veritas. And as the head of tech for Veritas in the region, I have a product-related question for you. So maintaining business continuity has been absolutely crucial this year more than ever, with unprecedented challenge worldwide. And it's clear that a product like Veritas Data Service Platform would help to maintain business continuity in an immediate sense. But how does partnering with an organization like Veritas support the long-term business continuity, particularly as businesses continue to face uncertainty?
Thank you, Annie. Very good question. And Savita, thank you. Good being with Condo on the panel today. So I think maybe I'll break your question up into a couple of pieces. I mean, obviously Veritas has been around we've been in this business as a pure play player for the last 25 years. So we've seen a lot of change when you talk about the long-term thing. And one of the key things we've always maintained is we've always been completely agnostic. So in the old days, we used to talk about, hardware agnostic when we had data centers. Now it's all about whether it's on-prem, cloud, multi-cloud. We can provide that layer of glue that can adapt over change to whatever your environment's going to look like in a couple of years. But I thought maybe just to paint that into paint a picture around that, I'll give you a story about if you asked me that question about 5 years ago, how I would have dealt with it, and maybe let's look at what it looks like today. So, a couple of years ago, you said, right, we need to do business continuity. I said, right, we need a plan. We need to put a business continuity plan in place, and we do something called a business impact analysis. We take all your applications and decide and look at all the servers that comprise those applications, and we put them on a graph. X-axis is the business impact if this thing goes down, and the Y-axis is, the likelihood of that going down. And eventually what we decided was, well, here in Dubai, it's very unlikely that things are going to sink into the desert. So generally speaking, we put one or two systems that were absolutely critical to the business process, and we built a plan around those. And really what that looked like was we did storage replication to make sure we had a copy of the data offsite. And we put a plan, a run book, a people and process plan around that. Okay. And the results of that was really that we had a very onerous process around doing our business continuity. Customers typically did dry runs every 6 months, and 60% of them failed, okay? Because there was no alignment between the business process and the technology. Okay, now think about today. The likelihood of you losing all your data in your data center is actually extremely high. We speak to customers probably once or twice a quarter about this. And that's not because we've got a flash floods all of a sudden happening in Dubai, but think about ransomware. All of a sudden, something that would have just targeted one system will actually progressively plan to take out an entire data system. So your plan needs to cater for all of that stuff. Okay. You then think about, as we're adopting cloud, our perimeters are changing. Those technologies that were, you just bought storage from a big storage vendor and that you did replication, that doesn't exist in the cloud. And you've got different people and approaches to doing things in the cloud. So to me, it's, very, very clear that we need to change our approach to doing this, be a lot more dynamic and a lot more integrated into the business process. The good thing is we've got some really cool enabling technologies, right? So in the old days, we had to buy all that infrastructure. Now we can just rent it from the cloud and use it when we need it. So that's a real leverage. We need to do long-term retention so that you can roll back in case you have for example, a ransomware attack. The cloud is a massive enabler of something that could be prohibitive in the past to do that. And we've got people who are becoming more and more in devs of process. So we don't have that disconnect between IT, and the business and how they're running it. So kind of to get onto the Veritas side of things, how do we help you there? Well, what I'd say is, as a first point, a lot of our customers, I hope on this call, probably already own some Veritas technology. They probably got a NetBackup or something like that. So my first point of entry is, listen, use what you've got to protect your data everywhere, whether it's in the cloud, whether it's on-prem, or utilize the cloud as a tier in order to do that. A lot of our customers are running older versions of our technology, and you'll be amazed the things we can do for you around ransomware protection, around leveraging new platforms and containers and new ways of deploying software. That's the baseline. Then, Tariq did a good example, taking you through a couple of graphs on how to gain insights into your data. We can give you very rich insights into your data through something called Aptar, which will allow you to make the right decisions in terms of what you're going to protect, okay, and how much you're going to spend on that money. And then the final thing is take that process, that business continuity process, and automate it. We have high availability now built into the core NetBackup product in something called VRP, where you can very quickly just leverage your existing NetBackup install to roll out into the cloud. And for the biggest tier apps, which will be a challenge when you move them across, or sometimes those are the big ugly things that sit on site on a big Unix system that nobody touches because it's the bit that makes all the money in the business. We've got our Infoscale that is used in the Fortune 100, 99% of the Fortune 100 to protect those applications, and we can help you to move those applications into the cloud and protect them between clouds and between regions to give you the availability you need. So, again, really, thanks for the question. I hope I didn't go too long there. But
no, it was perfect.
I'm very, very excited about this. Thank you.
So I'll go over to Amir now, and thank you so much again for joining us. I have read that 52% of Veritas customers are actually running a hybrid cloud environment. More and more people are pushing companies to shift to a multi or hybrid cloud environment. And in particular, in the MENA region, what is driving people to adopt hybrid cloud?
Thanks a lot for the question, Annie. I guess hybrid cloud was not never, it never started as a driver towards hybrid cloud. It's the fact that some of the applications by their own nature and some of the business process by their own nature needs to run on-prem. Some of the customer governing rules do not allow them to move the data to the cloud. And some of the financials of the cloud doesn't apply really. So we have a customer who moved, we were just discussing it with the customer yesterday. He moved back part of his workload on-prem, where he saved 40% of what he's paying for the cloud provider. Whereas the other workloads, when they maintain them in the cloud, it's actually cheaper. So it's more about the workload. So that's where having the right visibility and the right partner, the likes of Condo Protego, to actually look at the data, look at the system, look at the relationship, and which systems are better utilized on-prem, which systems can go for again, like Brett, yourself, and Tariq was trying to explain, infrastructure is commodity, applications are running everywhere, data is the important part. So which part of the data is important and which systems are protecting those data? Adding those up with the expertise for someone like Condo would actually tell you where it is cheaper to host the data. Because specifically in the current environment, it's cost, time, and risk, right? That's what's driving every single decision. Now it's more cost. When ransomware hits one of your industry peers, you would go to risk, and that's where you would pay. You know, like it's how it goes. So I mean, I hope that answers your question, but at least that's my belief, and that's what we see customers do.
Sure.
It's always a cycle. They go 80% cloud, and then they go back into the on-prem, and then they go again to the cloud. It depends on the app, the managers or the CIO's experience and success in driving process. Agility would always exist, like Brett said. Compute and storage and network addresses would be available at the same time you request them. You cannot implement that on-prem.
So it's really just about finding that balance, you know, what is appropriate for cloud, what is appropriate for on-prem, and marrying the two, correct? Okay, good. So Tariq, back to you.
What Amar said, Annie, sorry to interrupt you, but
oh no, please
add to what Amar said, because he's spot on when he says that, see, this is a journey. It's not like somebody moved to cloud and 80% of the applications and they're done and dusted and they can all go home and they can shut their data center down. That's not how it works, because there is no one solution for every app that is there in your data center. It has got to be, there has got to be a process of, I don't like to use the word trial and error, but it is that way, because for all good intentions, with all due diligence taken, you make some decisions, and because everybody is in this, you know, it's all new to everybody. It is not like you're installing SQL and it's been done a million times, so you know the best practices, or Oracle or anything else. These are all frontier decisions being made by business folk about moving to cloud. So it is really important that people are feeling their feet, and therefore before you commit, you should know where is the exit hatch. You know, you can't just enter into a room saying, yeah, that's fine, I don't need any tool, and I'm just going to migrate all my data because it's so simple. Everything is already on my Exchange servers or because Office apps are the first things easily you know, available to go completely onto the cloud with software as a service, not just infrastructure. So people think, yeah, that's fine, Microsoft will do everything for me. No, it doesn't work like that, because you need to have a escape hatch, an exit hatch, because you may want to reverse some of those decisions. You may want to, even if it is your Azure cloud, maybe you have your data center in one region and you want to replicate to another region, or have a DR in another region, have orchestration between the sites to balance your workloads. For all of that, you need proper tools. And that's where Veritas comes in, because that's the tool that gives you the option of maybe buying as a one-time purchase, one-use subscription model, or to buy a perpetual license. So you have that license to move around irrespective of what decision you're making presently. So you could presently say, I'm going 80% in the example Amar used, and then you reverse it back 40%, bring it back to prem. Then again, you move some of it back to another type of cloud. And for all of that, you need tools. And to imagine or assume that you can do it without it. I'm not just talking migration tools. I'm talking beyond management tools and orchestration tools. To imagine that it's possible without it would be underestimation.
And that's an incredible point that you made about this being sort of the frontier, and it speaks again to why it's so important for businesses to partner with the right people while moving forward into this new journey. And sort of to that point, Tariq, you mentioned in your presentation a statistic that I wrote down because I found it a bit alarming, that 50%, over 50% of the data that we own is dark data, it's unknown. So is Veritas Data Insight Solution, is it designed primarily to identify and mitigate risks, or can it be used to increase the visibility of that hidden data as well?
It's both. Okay, so Data Insight, it's a tool that it can help you see the data, and it can help you mitigate risk by identifying the critical files proactively on spot, rather than spending time on looking in each file or training the people what to do or what not to do. Data Insight proactively help bring on the risk files on top of the service. I can see it, I can take decisions, and it can help me take better decisions to keep and know what is the data that I have in my environment. So it is, yes, it is both. It mitigates risk and it gives me visibility.
So almost by having that visibility, by seeing that data, we can then take steps to mitigate risk, correct?
It's actually yes. So when you know the file, you will help not take the risk, but it also brings the risk on top before you look into the file. So we have two different dashboards, which is one for the risk. I can see the risk right now from right on when I open the application, and I can see my file. So it's two different views at the same time.
Thank you so much for the clarification.
No.
Well, thank you to all of our panelists. I'll wait for just a second to see if we have any more questions coming in. And it looks like that's the end of that. So we will, of course, there's been a few people asking to be in contact with you all after the webinar. So we'll put you in contact. And thank you so very much to all of our attendees, and especially to our panelists and our presenter for joining us today. And I'd just like to say, on behalf of CPI Media Group, thank you for attending, and just have a great rest of your day.
You too. Thank you.
Thank you. You too, Annie. Bye-bye.
Thank you.